welcome to the Juicy Life Leader Conference. I'm Sylvia Becker, your host, and I'm so delighted that you are joining me here with leaders from all around the world and our beloved experts to foster here a conversation about the evolution of leadership so that we all can become juicy life leaders where we can lead without sacrifice or compromise. And today I have Nancy Parsons here, and I want to quickly share why I'm so in love with her and her work. We met physically last year here in San Diego at a leadership conference, and she is the author of this fabulous book, Women Are Creating the Glass Ceiling and Have the Power to End It. And why am I so excited about it? For those of you who don't know me, I am, since my early 20s, part of the global women's liberation, women's emancipation, women's rising movement, however you like to call it. I have my own women's empowerment school. And here she is. Here I met her, a woman who has dedicated lots of her years into research to figuring out how women can break the glass ceiling, because there is this myth out there that there is this ceiling which is not penetratable. And so Nancy, I'm so excited to have you here because your brain and your heart are in such alignment with my own life's purpose and mission here of this conference. Nancy, welcome, welcome, welcome from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you, Sylvia. I'm delighted to be with you. It was just wonderful to meet you in San Diego, and I'm excited to talk with you today, but thank you very much.
So please share a tiny glimpse about your overall business, because you have a big consulting company and you have all these assessments. So share a tiny bit of what you do and a bit of your story, how you came into doing what you're doing.
Yes, actually, we started my company, which is called CDR Assessment Group, my business partner and I, in 1998. Wow. And our vision was to revolutionize leadership, because we knew from the data, we've been working in personality research and measures years before that, we knew that leadership was being done wrong. And actually back then the studies were saying that leadership was only, ineffectiveness rates rather, were like 50 to 75%. So we knew with science we could turn that around, turn it on its head. So we developed our assessments in 1998, and we had a leadership character assessment, a risk assessment for derailment, and a drivers and rewards measure. We call it our 3D suite. So we've been using that suite globally with executives and leaders in all industries, and even in the federal government and in academia. So we're in every industry, and large companies to small have used our assessments for their leaders, for their leadership teams, and they're even validated for selection and succession planning. So what that means is they're scientifically validated differently than you would see like a Myers-Briggs or something like that, because it's not only test-to-test reliability when the test is developed, but it's based on actual validating based on performance in jobs. That's the second step of validity that you need in order to use an assessment tool for selection or promotional decisions. So it's like the real McCoy, right? But the thing that is so nice about it is then we can develop leaders accurately with it, versus just many assessments, many organizations, you'll see them just talk about the soft stuff or the happy stuff or superficial, but it's not really getting us to where we need to be. And the other piece when it comes to women and minorities, women in particular, that we study, is you miss so much hidden talent in organizations, because those traditional lenses and biases of the day are not promoting enough women, yet they may be the most talented in many of the organizations. And that's kind of what we found in our research. But to make a long story short about what we do, we have primarily focused on leadership development, executive coaching. We have two clients, executive coaches who use our tools, and we train and develop and work with them. And then our organizational clients are companies. So I have somebody knocking at my door. I tried to keep, may I open my door really quickly?
Sure,
I apologize.
sure.
I have
No worries.
here.
We are all working at home, so no worries.
I'm so sorry about that. I thought I could keep them out, but they can see me through the glass doors. My Cavalier King Charles, Effie and Finnegan. So with working at home, it's been, you know how they are, they cling to you now.
Absolutely, and some of the family members become superstars by being bloomed from our videos. So no worries. If someone bursts into your room, we will record this, and your video goes viral. So what I heard you saying is, what I love is that the assessments you created are, in my words, like a magnifying glass. And
Correct.
They can show, because they make things obvious and aware and measure, they can show things which are often hidden, like the hidden talents. Absolutely. Or negatively, the biases inside a company, inside a system. So you become like a detective for the quality, the resources, and where leaders can benefit from specific development to bring out the best in people. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. We've even done what we call in our validity research. We have them fill out, the subject matter experts fill out what they think they need in a particular job.
Yeah.
But we use that, but then we also validate the actual best performers to the, lower performers. But very frequently, what they think they need, the subject matter experts, is not what they need for the best performers. So sometimes what we think we need in terms of who's going to perform that job best is not what we need at all. So it's not even a matter, it's not intention. I think people are definitely, for the most part, they want to do the right things. They want to bring on the best talent and all that. It's just that over the years, we've developed these processes that just aren't working for us, So I think the intent is to try to find and develop the best people in the best ways. But without science, you can't do it. It's just not going to work. It's not. And so now here we are, when I was at MECO with you, here we are 21 years later into my business. The needle hasn't moved. Leaders are still showing up on the various studies at 50 to 75% ineffective. So if we must, so now I'm at a later stage of my career. So it's become very urgent that we must adopt science, pull that into our decision making, pull that into our development so we get it right, instead of all this hit or miss stuff.
You said now twice, for me, a horrifying number. So 50 to 75% of leaders are ineffective. Correct. Can you please define a bit what you mean when you say ineffective, so that we put these numbers in perspective?
Yes. So in other words, studies were, now you're going to have me quote this. There's like volumes of studies that are showing that 82% of companies, for example, saying that their leadership capacity, their bench strength, they don't have enough leader talent. So 82% of companies are saying that. They're saying, for example, I think it was a SHRM study, that in the first year and a half, 75% or above leaders fail. They don't make it. So if you add up those bodies of studies, and there's been a lot of articles, even in Forbes and other places, saying leadership is failing largely. Now, here's the other problem. So here's the problem for us as executive coaches and leadership development experts. I can't walk into my clients and just put that out there, because they will show me the door really quickly. Because in their own minds, they'll think, well, we're not, we don't have 50% of our leaders or 60% that aren't doing well. But it is true, and the data shows it. Here's the other problem. So when you have that in actuality, we have a systemic problem, because competency models, performance reviews, they're all fluffy. They're telling everybody they're doing it. We did some work at the Pentagon some years ago, and we linked our assessment results to their competency models and then into their learning management system. Well, what was really interesting was at the Pentagon and in their executive ranks, they have 12 executive core qualifications that we're linking to. Now, in the past, they've always been told, when you do the performance reviews or whatever, you're doing really well in these, 10 of 12, you're meeting targets or you're exceeding expectations. Nonsense. When we do the measures, They will be lucky in those 12 if they have a strength in 5 of them. And they might have a potential strength in 2 or 3 and a non-strength in the others, because human beings are not hardwired to be good at all these myriad of things. We're just not. So we set up, in the end, what we have is fiction because it's socially acceptable. It is not acceptable to say, hey, you're good at this strategy, but on operations, don't even think about it because you don't have, we don't talk like that. Well, you're pretty good at this, we would say. One other example I have to give you, if you don't mind. Some years back, I was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal by a columnist named Jared Sandberg. And he had written an article about backstabbing in the workplace. So I sent him an email and said, we measure that and more in our risk assessment. So he called me and he decided to take our assessments and have coaching with me. So for his research, he took 2 other companies' assessments at that time. And he had feedback with them as well. So that was kind of his research. Both of those other companies told him he had leadership capability and potential. It just needed to be developed. Well, no, I didn't tell him that. I told him he didn't have any. Don't even think about a leadership job. You're in the right job. He's an investigative journalist, and he reported this in his article. And he told me, he said, well, I think you're right, Nancy, because my dog won't even listen to me, right? But the point was, we measure, one of our many measures is leadership energy. He scored 6th percentile out of 100 on leadership energy. In order to even think about being in a leadership position, you need a mid-range score. So here's the problem. I think that many consultants and others tell people what they think they want to hear versus what they really should hear, which is the truth. And you know what? He loved it. He's a great investigative journalist with like 2 master's degrees. He's so clever, so smart, but he doesn't want to manage people and projects. Unfortunately, this is how we sometimes promote people, because they're really smart, they're technically competent. So we just assume they can be leaders because this thing about we can teach everybody to lead. No, we cannot. I will stand here. Now, there's a good number of people that have a pulse on it that, yes, can be developed, but there's a lot of other people who should not be in leadership roles, period. And we're not afraid to say that. And I think that's a problem too, in terms of why these numbers are as crazy as they are. The other part of the reason the numbers are as bad as they are is, as I told you, we measure leadership risks, right? Most people don't even know what their risks are. And they're just running amok in organizations. And what risks are ineffective behaviors or inappropriate behaviors. So if they're just running wild because people don't even know what they are and they're unconscious behaviors, wow.
And about the risk, I want to go deeper. But
But anyway, let me do what we do.
I love it because I love that you are taking a stand, which is provocative. I have other philosophies and experts who would say everyone can be a leader. It's even a meme out there. And I love your confidence based in your scientific research that you say we cannot teach everyone to lead, which intuitively resonates, I think, with me from a minimum very strongly. So I want to go into the risk factors. But before we do that, one step back, because here in the whole conference, one thread we are following here in the discussion is that leaders nowadays, 2020 and forward, especially in the environment of the global pandemic, we all are reevaluating our definition, what success means to us. How we want to be successful. So this is why I honed in what is the definition of effectiveness or ineffectivity, because you are measuring things where you said some other assessments might rank someone high, like high effective in leadership or high talent, but you, with your assessments, you could pin down, no, not really, just in the 6th lowest percentile of energy. So there are different definitions, right?
Well, here's the thing. I didn't see their measures, but I'm pretty sure that their measures tell them this person is low on whatever they're calling leadership or take charge stuff. So I think their measures are pretty accurate, but I don't think that consultants are willing to tell the truth. I think it's more that socially we're not allowed to tell somebody, it's one of these, we're always told we can be anything we want to be. And that's just not true. We have great gifts and talents, and we need to find each person's unique gifts and talents. But we can't be everything. I'm not going to be a physician. I'm not going to be an accountant. Lord, oh my goodness, that'd be just a disaster for any company. So we have some, but I can do some things pretty well, but other things not so much, right? And let me tell you the other thing. We've been coaching people. We've been coaching thousands of leaders for all these years, and they love their own data. They love the truthfulness, the honesty. They love it that you're not blowing smoke at them. So I think, you know, and the other thing is when you put somebody in a job that they're really not well equipped for, it creates a lot of stress for them and for other people. They're unhappy. They can even become physically ill. It's a very difficult situation. So the best we can do for people in our businesses is to find the right best fit. They'll be happy, they'll be productive, and life will be good. It will be team development, open communications will just be so different than it is today.
And that leads to a juicy life. When a person is fitting to the position, job they are in, that is a level of alignment, of congruence, of satisfaction, which spills out into all areas of their lives.
Right.
I totally agree with what you said, the impact on health. I mean, we have here experts on the conference who clearly say that when you constantly work every day in a job which is against your design, how you are wired, how you are meant to work and live, it's painful, it's stressful, it creates complete dissonance.
And that's what we measure. See, we can measure it quickly, so we can help somebody at the first coaching session know the path they need to be on from the first coaching session. So it's kind of like, we have your blueprint. Why not take a look at it? Why not let this coach help you understand your blueprint?
Oh my gosh, so many questions are coming now to me. Let's reconnect what you said a few minutes ago, the risk factors. I would love you to go a bit deeper in that, and also, if possible, even though the conference here, we are not focusing in the whole conference on the gender topic, but you know how close it is to my heart. Yeah. I believe we need more diversity in leadership teams, especially to create a post-corona pandemic world together to find solutions for these complex global problems like the climate crisis. We need more women in top positions. So when you talk about the risk factors, see if you can, because I know from your reading your book that there are very interesting differences in the risk factors between men and women. So please go ahead.
Correct. Good. So what we found, first, the character assessment is a personality measure. And, you know, it's very in-depth, but that's your strengths, your gifts, your bright sides. The risk assessment is also personality-based, okay? So we measure 11 risks, and these show up under stress, pressure, adversity, under conflict, or somebody's pushing your buttons, or even if you're not feeling well, if you're tired. And right now with the COVID and so forth, I think the risks are running amok for people because a lot of people are very stressed and uncomfortable. But anyway, so these 11 risks, what we found, first on as far as leadership capability and strengths, men and women are equally well capable to serve as leaders. We know this in the data. Doing performance research, we were running our numbers against 360 data, you know, and as we were separating by different groups and we separated by gender, you know, we saw this stark difference between men and women on the risk factors. And what it showed, and it was statistically significant, that the women leaders tended to be what we call high worriers as their risk, which is fear of failure, fear of making a mistake. So when there's pressure and adversity, or they feel on the spot, they freeze, they go inside their head, they overanalyze, they overwork. That's why you often see women working so hard, often carrying a department, because she wants to get it just right. So this worrier thing kicks in. The other thing that it does is she often goes silent. So when they're, say, at a meeting and she starts worrying, she bites her tongue because she wants to make sure she's 100% right. Meanwhile, the men in the study were egotists, upstagers, and rule breakers, okay? So think about the worrier. The woman is what we call moving away. She's avoiding conflict. Meanwhile, the men are just running right into it. As an egotist, they're all about them. They think they're smarter, brighter, overestimate what they can do. The upstager means they're going to oversell themselves and push their point of view. And the rule breaker means they'll even say things that aren't true or push to win. You know, they're just very aggressive. So what happens though even though the worrier is ineffective for the woman, and the egotist, upstager, and rule breaker is very ineffective as well, which one do you think looks more leader-like?
In the old image of the warrior, of the fighter, of the father, of the pusher, obviously the egotist, rule breaker, and upstager comes across as the big guy.
It's not the old image. It's not just the old image. It's the current image that you need to be brave, you need to be pushing. Now, here's the thing, and it is wrong because they can be over-aggressive. So we know today that about 70% of leaders have some level of egotists, and then most of them are upstagers, etc. Here's the other part of the study we did, though, that was really fascinating. So that was the larger groups. So then we decided to study executive women and women who are CEOs to see, because I had a hunch with the women I'd been coaching, they weren't worriers, right? So anyway, it turned out that the women CEO group, their risks were identical to the men. So those women that were entrepreneurs or head of their companies, their risks, they were fighters just like the men, even under risks. And then the women, the CEO corporate women had upstager. They were not rule breakers and egotists, and that meant that they could at least continue to assert themselves during difficult times. Okay, so there is something to be said for, you have to be aggressive enough to stay in the game, to stay engaged. So we can't just excuse the worrying behaviors and say, but what we can do, we need to develop women differently. We can help them overcome those risks, not use those resort to worrying behaviors in the tough situations. It will take development. It will take coaching. It will take, role playing and modeling so they practice it, but they certainly can learn. And we even have in the book, you'll know there's a risk analysis form to help them sort through what triggers me to, when's the last time my worrier showed up, right? And then, or last couple times, what triggered it? What caused me to go into my worry mode? What was the impact? What was the fallout? What were the consequences? And then what the coach would help them do, or in workshops, whatever your process is, help them to come up with different alternatives to not worrying. So rather than just going quiet, she has a plan and she's practiced it. I know that when Joe pushes my buttons, next time I'm going to come back with this type of a question, write it down, practice it under heat. So when the next moment shows up, she's equipped and ready.
So what I love about what you're saying is, in our current society, we have often sadly this either or thinking, black or white thinking,
right?
Where men are this and women are that. So there is then either the meme, men and women are completely different and could never be both fit for leadership, or the exact opposite. No, women and men are completely the same. They have both the same capabilities and skills to be leaders. So what I love about your research is you are differentiating these black and white thinking, and you show not only the grayscale, you show the colorful scale of the individual persona and how they show up. And I also like that you say, yes, the majority of egotists, rule breakers, and upstagers currently show up to be men, but we also see in top women leaders that, for example, the upstager personality is needed under times of pressure and stress in order to assert themselves and stay in the game.
Absolutely. Yes. So the problem is, like, the worrier loses visibility. She may be the best on the team when things are okay. But if you show up to meetings all the time and you don't even speak up, and the men are all yak, 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 or other women yak, 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 if they're, that's what we call a moving against profile under stress. They're fighters. If you are one who retreats and goes quiet, nobody's even noticing you. Does that make sense? So
yes.
we can help women. That's where we need to cut. Our whole approach is what we call a micro to macro approach to learning and development and coaching. We must start with the individual. And as you picked up, Sylvia, it's all based on individuals. It's not based on your sex, whether you're a good leader or not. Now, there are problems in that we tend to promote people who are too aggressive at times and not thoughtful and make bad decisions and do things that are not maybe appropriate intimidate the rest. But if we start using objective measures, then we can start pulling in people who are talented. Right now, we can't see those women because they're hidden from view. They do need different development. They do need to learn to be more assertive in tough times. They can't hold back. But on the other side, we need to hold people accountable for overly aggressive, ineffective, and inappropriate behaviors. And we don't do enough of that today.
Can you please repeat that last sentence? This is,
we
don't go into politics, but I want this.
No. The truth of it is, yes. No. And across all sectors.
Yes.
Remember I said earlier, the leadership behaviors are risks are running amok. People are allowed to use these ineffective, inappropriate behaviors, and we just turn the other way. They're not held accountable because we're looking at the results or what have you, or because they checked off the right boxes. Organizations have to stop doing that. And we have to hold our leaders more accountable. I think, don't get me wrong, I see some organizations, a lot of publicly held organizations, doing a really good job at holding their leaders accountable. Many of the clients we work with. So I don't want to paint everybody with a broad brush, but at the same time, even in the academic sector, I'm talking top, you'll see things that you're going, I can't believe they're doing this, and they do it. So it's not, no one's immune to it. We see it in the government. Obviously, we see it in politics daily. Politics is probably the worst place for it. It's like the hornet's place of the risk factors, right? But the thing is, we need to call it out. We need to identify and say, when we boil it all down to, when I used to teach, coaching skills for leaders and all the rest of it, the one thing I would tell them, you have one job, and that one job that has two parts. You must show respect for the people who work with you and work around you, and you must show them you value them. That's your job. And then from there, we can work on the development, the talent advocate. But what I'm saying is, here's the other thing, because we all have risks, everyone has risks, no matter who you are. We all have a different set of risks. They are not excuses for bad behavior. They are not excuses for bad behavior, but yet they flourish. And some of it, like, it's really interesting. Like one measure we have, I know it's not in the research as much, but like false advocate is one of our measures. And that's like passive aggressive behaviors. And it used to be, passive aggressive used to be part of the DSM-3 and 4, personality disorders. They took it out of the DSM-5 because they said it was too prevalent in society. Okay, but we still measure it. We still measure it under false advocate. But the point being is, so that's covert disagreement. So you're saying something and I pretend I agree, but I really don't. And then I maybe work against you or drag my feet. We'll see whole teams, whole executive teams that are all false advocates. How effective do you think their communications is? Or like,
I wish I could hug you right now. I'm falling more and more in love with you. Do you have German ancestry? Because you are talking so.
My maiden name is Roth, R-O-T-H. So yeah, I'm German and Irish descent.
You say it as it is. I love that. So you are really, when companies have the courage to let you in, you are cleaning out the smoke.
Right.
You're lifting the carpet, and everything which was swiped under the carpet becomes visible. And you bring forth the truth, the reality on which we then can create the specific development trainings and coaching programs that specific people really need, and not be based on sugar-coated tubes of assumptions.
Or not based on generic models, not based on competencies. You got to base it on them, not on some out there competency that they can't even relate to. Like I talked about the Pentagon having that, there's no way that people could live up to all of that. So
I would like, towards the last third of our conversation here, to go more into the focus on how can women break the glass ceiling, because they have the power. They are part of creating it, and they have the power to break through. And in your book, you have these amazing pages after pages full of the biases women are running into. So could you maybe share the 3 most common ones, 3, maximum 5, so that people get a taste of what's sadly still prevalent? Because when I read your book, I thought, okay, I'm 53 now. I thought this is done by now, or it was what you would probably say, my wishful thinking. I wished or projected into our world. We should be way beyond that.
Yes, yes, no. So yeah, what we did, we have two ways of looking at the perceptions out there. We did look at the Pew survey data, that's a social survey of how women and men leaders are viewed. So that was eye-opening. But the other thing, before we move into that, I just wanted to mention, we also look at our own risks. And we did research around, if a man and a woman have the same risk, they're not described by the same in the organization. Think about it that way. So that's one bias. If a woman is, for example, if she's an egotist, she's a bitch. The guy is just pretty assertive. I mean, we use different language. If if a woman's a worrier, she's too afraid. She's not leader-like. If a man is a worrier, he's thoughtful. The language matters. If a woman is an upstager, she's annoying. She just doesn't shut up. And he's got it. He's willing to speak up and push his view. I'm just saying, our language often, what's tolerated for a man in leadership on these behaviors, on these risks, is very different than what's tolerated for a woman. I can tell you from personal experience, I've worked at a shipyard, a coal mine, and pipeline operations when I was in my HR days. One of my popular nicknames was Dragon Lady, okay? So there you go. So that's one form of just subtle, how people view people. So if a man has a certain behavior and is like aggressive, that's more acceptable. But when a woman is aggressive, there's women that are making it, they have a harder battle to fight to be accepted, even though it helps them to be more effective, to succeed, we'll say. Now, the other biases are like cultural biases. For example, women are viewed as the more emotional sex. We're labeled as overly emotional. And that's actually wrong. In our research, well, there's two things. What's wrong about it is when we measure emotionality, one's actual temperament, emotions, up and down moods, etc., that's under two constructs that we measure of adjustment and hypermoody. And when we look at those measures, men and women score very similarly. There's not a huge difference. Now, I think when they talk about emotionality, people think nurturing. Nurturing is a separate construct. How caring and helpful and supportive we are of people is different than our emotional, whether we're crying, laughing, or angry. They are separate constructs, but they get lumped in together, so then we're all called emotional. We are more nurturing. We have higher interpersonal sensitivity. So yes, but that's also a gift for leaders, because those women leaders in the corporate women I talked about, they were much higher on interpersonal sensitivity than any other group. They were upstagers and high interpersonal sensitivity. So they could speak up and they could network and they could build bridges and build teams, okay? But I just want you to know, we aren't more emotional. Even our hyper moodies, not that greatly different than men, even though people would accuse us of being more hyper moody.
So is it here, one tiny question about that, more on the level of expression? So the swings of moods are the same in men and women, but by society, per tradition, I mean, boys grow up hearing, don't cry, yeah, be tough, yeah, a warrior who goes to war doesn't cry, so it's more suppressed, so men...
Yes, it's more, right, spot on. They hide their emotions, or they show it in ways of anger, impatience, things of that nature, and that's acceptable. So they express their emotionality differently, or they hide it. You were spot on. Where women tend to be more freer with their emotions, not often, and many of them aren't as prone to be as short-tempered or angry. Some are, but many more might resort to crying or might resort to pouting or whatever, hiding away, whatever. But but we're labeled that way. So that was one that I found really intriguing. But there's others. Let's see, what was a couple others I was going to look at real quick. What was the other? The compassionate, also that we were rated 85% higher in compassionate. And while we are more compassionate, as I said, than men, men are not bottomed out on that either. 80-5 doesn't really, is not a fair representation of the men. So we kind of hit the men hard on that one. In terms of manipulative.
Wait a second, I love what you just said. So your scientific measurements have shown that men and women, when it comes to compassion, are much more equal than in society the public conversation makes them look.
Right. Now women are higher, but men have a good pulse on it too. They're not absent of compassion mostly. Okay. Now the women are going to score about 15 or so points higher, but the men aren't like in the 0 ranges. They're in the high 30s. So it's a good range generally. Now, keep in mind, I'm talking averages. So some people will be low, some high. But I'm telling you, I coach women and men both who have 5 on interpersonal sensitivity. You know, it is not a gender thing, which I love about what we do. It's all based on the individual. Now, when we start aggregating it, we see trends, obviously, and that's what we're talking to, the trends. But
so in order for corporations to fill their pipeline of female high potentials really till the top, so for women to internally break the glass ceiling inside themselves and in companies, what are 2-3 tips you have?
Yes, okay.
In an ideal world, what would you like them to see to do?
Well, ideally, I would like them to become very self-aware, to take an assessment like ours. Ours are one similar that would be somewhat similar, but really get to know what their strengths and risks and what they need, what they love in life, what their motivations are, their drivers. And then develop from there. Then you build a plan from there. And I have to, I don't know if it's okay for me to say, but I actually launched a new company recently. It's a technology company. It's a learning technology company. And we will now, individual coaching that you and I do and our peers do in ACEC and others and ICF, it's expensive. Executive coaching is a fairly high price point. And one of our concerns were all along, even with women, but we had customers saying, boy, we'd like to be able to give it to lower levels in the organization, the assessments and the coaching. So out of a client request, and it was actually the Army Civilian University a few years back, they asked us if we could do an multimedia or an AI type coach to do the debrief on the assessments. And we're just getting ready to launch that. So we're actually in beta testing right now. So that way, women, here's what women can do. Women, I really think they need to take assessments like ours because it is too hard. It could take you 5 years to try to figure out what we can give you in a 2.5 to 3 hour coaching session. I mean, obviously executive and one-to-one coaching is the best way to get your information. Unfortunately, we don't just sell the data without people having some feedback, because it is something very different and it's very deep. So we have certified coaches to do that. You can even get team debriefs if you want, but it has to be debriefed. And now we have this new tool coming onto the market that people can actually take it and have their avatar debrief all of their results. And it is so deep, Sylvia, it's so deep. The character assessment is a 40-minute debrief. And then the risk and the drivers are about 20 minutes or so. So it's not just but that's an individual, but they need individual feedback. However that happens, they need to get it.
I also like that even here in your book, which, by the way, for those viewer here, if you are wondering when did the research happen, this book is published last year, 2019. So everything we are discussing here is not 20, 30, 40 years old, it's current. And I love that in the end, you give even a recommended reading list. Yes. Fitting to the risk factors. So if you know under stress you have a tendency to be either the warrior or an upstager, you find here resources fitting to your personality type under stress. I love that.
And the other thing that we do too, just so you know, we don't have a lot of coaches in house, so we send people to the coaching world. So our role is to help people. Now we help coaches, but we also help people find coaches, so they can work with them. But it's so worth the investment. We're working now with even like graduate studies programs and MBA programs to help people. We're helping one thing that we love to our philanthropic work is helping veterans. So we're helping veterans assimilate and get on the right career path. So anyway, it's just, people love it. Like I said, the eye-opening that we get. And every time we work with executives, they just say, I wish I had done this 30 years ago. So that's what I leave you with, is that, wow, you know, it's so eye-opening. And we really do go to, we let people know this is going to be unlike any other feedback you've had. It's going to be truthful. It's going to be deep. Sometimes it might feel a little, you know, uncomfortable at first, but we're going to help them through it. So that's why the coaching is so perfect, you know.
Perfect summary. Thank you, my dear. And beloved viewer, below the interview here, below the video on Nancy's here solo speaker page, you find the links. You find the links to her book and to her webpage and all the resources, so
Great.
that you can get more of Nancy and her scientific brilliance and love for the individual. Nancy, this is the key I take from our conversation. I can sense your heart, and you're fighting for really the honest truth about the individual, who we are, what we are capable of, and also not sugarcoating the risk factors we all have. We all are humans. So being human means being messy and having risk factors. And I love that you bring honesty into corporate human development, into the coaching industry, and with that into our society. And in times of fake news and so many illusions and delusions and conspiracy theories and this and that, we need science, we need truth, we need measurement. So thank you, Nancy, for...
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you.
And big success with your next adventure. I'm so excited.
Okay. All right. It's going to be fun. We'll see. Okay. Take care.
Bye, my dear. Thank you for watching. Bye.